organization dedicated to freedom in North Korea believes President Trump is on the right track in his dealings with Kim Jong-un. Chad Groening has more.
President Trump has received much credit for deciding to abandon last week's summit with Kim in Hanoi, Vietnam, when it was apparent the North Korean dictator was not going to agree to Trump's demands regarding denuclearization. Trump said no deal was far better than a bad deal. Suzanne Schulte is chairman of the North Korea Freedom Coalition.
I do believe that Trump has an anointing. I really believe this is the art of the deal versus the art of deception. And Trump was really giving this dictator a way forward that could bring prosperity to North Korea, could open them up to reform, and Kim Jong-un wouldn't accept the conditions.
And Schulte says Trump's strategy is working.
At least at this point, there hasn't been any more testing. But I do believe the sanctions have had incredible impact. That's what's brought Kim Jong-un to the negotiating table, because they are feeling a lot of pressure. But I do believe that the maximum pressure campaign is going to continue.
Schulte says she is confident that with people like Mike Pompeo and John Bolton on his team, President Trump is not going to be duped into a bad deal with North Korea. I'm Chad Groening.
An Indiana bus company has learned a hard lesson about the Constitution.
Tippecanoe County Right to Life of Lafayette, Indiana, sought to run ads on the public transportation buses, but was rejected. Alliance Defending Freedom attorney Samuel Green tells AFN the ads were beautiful.
It includes 2 ultrasound images of unborn babies and a picture of a newborn baby. And it has the words, me, me again, and still me across those 3 pictures to convey the undeniable scientific truth that the child within the womb is the same human child after birth that we cherish.
The 3rd picture on the ad reflects the adult. The government's transportation arm rejected the ad because it violated its policy of running ads of a political nature. However, its policy does not trump the U.S. Constitution. So ADF filed suit, and after months of litigation, Lafayette has learned it was guilty of viewpoint discrimination and settled the lawsuit.
We're just glad that this ad is now running, conveying the scientific truth that unborn children are humans and deserving of protection, and we hope that the message will get out there and save lives, and that the government entities around the country will always remember that the First Amendment must be respected. They can't discriminate against unpopular viewpoints.
I'm Charlie Butts.
The February jobs report falls short. Jenny Casola has more.
There were just 20,000 new jobs created in February, far fewer than expected. Hiring softened in construction, retail, and shipping. Economists were expecting 180,000 new jobs. The unemployment rate slipped to 3.8% as fewer people reported being unemployed. Americans were making more. Average hourly earnings rose 0.4% in February. The increase in pay for the year rose 3.4%. The largest since 2009. Ginny Cosola, Fox News.
After the deadly tornadoes in Alabama last weekend, the threat of severe storms tomorrow is increasing across parts of Mississippi.
There's now an enhanced risk north of Jackson. That means tornadoes are considered likely in those areas. There's a slight risk as far south as a Natchez Meridian line, and southeast Mississippi will be under a marginal risk tomorrow. This will be the 3rd weekend in a row that Mississippi has faced the threat of severe storms. But Mike Edmonston at the National Weather Service office in Jackson says we should not be surprised.
This is our severe weather season, and it's looking pretty active so far.
The storms are expected to move into Mississippi by mid-morning tomorrow and push to the southeast during the afternoon and evening hours. Randy Bell in Jackson.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
There's a particular reason why there is a Back to God radio show. It was about 4 years ago, God called me out of the pulpit and said, Dexter, I need you to go tell my people it's time for them to get back to God, back to my morals, back to my values. This is the thing that you're supposed to do simply because you belong to the Most High God. It's the least that you could do for a God that loves you the way that he does.
Time to get back to God. Weekday afternoons at 4 Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We have our military sent to the border. We have 8,000 military personnel right now at the border. We are doing an amazing job considering it's really an onslaught.
Apparently, this is not what Representative Omar said. It's what she believes. And if she believes that, she ought to just own up to it and stop pretending. I guess Speaker Pelosi today couldn't decide whether Omar is an anti-Semite or if she's stupid.
This is a time of testing for the House of Representatives, and if I may, it's really a moral test about how clearly they will speak out, in this case, against what Congresswoman Omar said, which was clearly anti-Semitic.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome to the program today. Happy Friday. Oh yeah. Can you just love on Friday for a second? Just feel that Friday getting into you. Feel it soaking into you. Understand that Friday is something special. It's basically the evening of the weekend. It's just such a outstanding thing. Friday, I say. We salute you, Friday. And I'm saying that because it has been a particularly long week for me weather-wise, and then I've just been feeling pretty horrible. Like, it's been a really interesting week. And, you know how it is when you get a little good news, you get a little bad news, you get a little news, and then you have to kind of deal with that and have all of that going on in between everything else. And it's just been interesting. And so I'm looking forward to unplugging and having some time to just absorb everything that's gone on this week. And the show, we just have so much for you today. It's going to be a fantastic program. Our guest is up in the air. So just so you know, live radio and booking guests, you do the best you can. You schedule people, and then their lives interfere. So we don't know if we're going to have Ellis Stewart, who's a CNN political commentator and former senior communications advisor for presidential campaigns. We don't know if we're going to have her or not. So I just will let you know that she's supposed to be here. And we're also going to be talking about Omar. So, you know, I've been giving short shrift to these new progressives. And the new progressives, you know, we covered them a little bit in the beginning, and we've talked about AOC. I think we've given her more than her fair share. And I've kind of felt as if Dr. Carol Swain has it right when she says we should leave these people to their own devices. But there is something that when they're doing, like when they're being anti-Semitic, we got to address that. And we did talk a little bit on the show about it yesterday with Stephen Solomon, who came on. He's a radio host and also, you know, former military intelligence officer. And he had some great comments. And I would have left it alone there, but there's a new development in this story in that they took up a resolution in the House of Representatives to basically say that racism is bad, anti-Semitism is bad, and hatred towards Muslims is bad. Now, I don't disagree with any of that. Those are true statements. But why are we discussing hatred against Muslims and racism instead of discussing the anti-Semitism on display by Omar? So I think it's a great time for us to listen to this audio from Joe Lieberman, who has always been a very thoughtful leftist, right? He's always been a thoughtful Democrat. And in this statement, he kind of articulates the quandary that the Democrats are facing. And then after that, I want to just really quickly, you know, we'll see a parting of the ways, as Stephen Solomon mentioned yesterday. We're going to see a parting of the ways, but I think there's something more than that that's going on here, and it echoes some sentiments that I've had about what we're seeing everywhere, where like the Me Too movement and the sex abuse scandals coming out of Hollywood. They were open secrets before, but if you were in certain parts of America or in certain industries, you could ignore it. You could not be aware of it. And now we're getting to a place in America where there aren't any safe spaces or spots you can occupy where you can be held not responsible for knowing that this organization represents this or that. Like the mask has been ripped off of Planned Parenthood. They actually enjoy aborting the babies. They want everyone to have an abortion. If you're of childbearing years and you're a woman, you need to have an abortion because they profit off of it by selling the parts of the babies that are aborted. It's the same thing with Hollywood. When we look at the films there now, there are very few stars left who haven't given their allegiance to the Democrats. And the ones who haven't given their allegiance are drummed out of Hollywood or iced out of, you know, prime roles and parts because it's a single-celled kebab. It doesn't allow any diversity of thought or opinion. And we see this happening all over the place in colleges and universities, places that maybe our parents went to, or our older, aunts and uncles, older siblings went to, maybe our spouses, maybe we went to. And these universities are now coming out and they're ripping the mask off and they're pledging allegiance to the Democrats. And so it's one thing to say, everybody has a political leaning. It's another thing to say that socialism is what we must adhere to. Infanticide is what we must adhere to. We must look the other way when there's sexual abuse and abuse of women, assaults, things like that. We have to allow rapists and pedophiles in our midst. That kind of stuff, those are the dividing lines on which you have to pick a side. And I've been saying it now for, I think we're going on maybe a little over a year. I've been saying we have to pick a side. It's always been that way, but it's never been more clear than it is now that we have to choose a side. So we can't straddle the fence anymore or stand near the fence and jump on one side when it's convenient and be on the other side when it's convenient. We have to choose God. We have to choose His truth, His word, His ways, or we're choosing the other side. There's no gray space that we can comfortably occupy and act as if everything that we've seen recently hasn't gone on. Same thing with the border. You can't say, well, I'm for open borders, but I'm against human trafficking and sexual slavery. There's no room for you to do that anymore. So Joe Lieberman, and this is a really short clip here, he says it's a moral test for the Democratic Party, and I couldn't agree with him more. It's number 3.
First thing is that words matter, and when people say words that are biased, bigoted, and hurtful to another group of people, another group of Americans, they have to be condemned quickly, or else it takes hold. And that I'm not only thinking about anti-Semitism, I'm thinking about racism, I'm thinking about any kind of bigotry toward any religious group or any other group. So I think this is a time of testing for the House of Representatives, and if I may, it's really a moral test about how clearly they will speak out, in this case, against what Congresswoman Omar said, which was clearly anti-Semitic.
So one of the things that I really was interested in when I was, just thinking about that, is there's also a bit of a dividing mark between the way Jewish people see themselves in America. An increasing percentage of Jewish Americans see themselves as American Jews, and they don't feel they have a connection or a strong link to Israel. And so these are Jews on the left, obviously, the leftist Jews. This has to happen. If you think logically about this, it has to happen, because how can you say you have a strong tie to Israel when the party that you support is anti-Israel? And so then you go within the party a little further and you see Jews like Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She has a strong allegiance to the nation state of Israel. She's very traditional in her views about the Jewish identity, lots of things like that. And when you look at it that way, you can see where there's a huge schism, and there's no path forward that permits Omar to continue to hold the views that she holds. Because this, if you notice, have you noticed, just think for a second, out of everything you've heard from every Democrat who has gone on the record to talk about this issue, has anyone said, you've got this wrong, you misheard what she said, she doesn't believe that about Jewish people? No, you haven't heard that, because none of the Democrats who are defending her are confused in the slightest about what she believes. They know she's anti-Semitic. They know she believes it. They know she represents a constituency from her congressional district who are also anti-Semitic, and all they care about is keeping those votes. Now, I don't know why they're so worried about it, because if you are a practitioner of Islam and you're living in one of the beachheads here in America, you don't have any room over at the Republican side, because we're wanting you to become an American. We don't care about you being here. It's that we want you to be an American. So we want you to take off the headscarf of oppression, stop practicing Sharia, stop trying to replicate the same results that you had in your old country here in this country. Stop trying to turn our fantastic country into another little slice of Islamic, oppression from over there. So they don't have any room over here to come. They, it's not like they're going to come over here and find a bunch of anti-Semites. We are the strongest supporters of Israel and the nation state of Israel and what it represents to us. We're the strongest supporters. There's no hands down. So there's not any danger of losing those constituents, but maybe they're worried they won't come out and vote. Maybe they're worried they won't actually write checks or do the online donations. So they want to keep Omar and her constituency group happy, which means for Islam, there is no apologizing for anti-Semites comments, anti-Semitic comments. In Islam, the anti-Semitism is baked into the cake. So they're going to have to negotiate with the bad guys. And so don't get confused. I'm not saying every person who practices Islam is a bad guy, or that every person who comes from Omar's district is a bad guy or believes the same thing she believes. Not everyone, but she does represent a core group of constituents who propelled her to office from her district. Otherwise, how did she get elected? And they don't have a problem with what she's saying because her phones aren't ringing off the hook. Nobody's writing any stories about angry and upset voters from her district, calling into, CNN or MSNBC because they wouldn't report on it, or Fox News to say, she doesn't represent me. I don't believe what she believes. They hear her saying that stuff and they're egging her on Twitter. They like it. It's a symbol that they finally have someone who believes what they believe, who's in the halls of power, who can amplify that voice. So the question for Democrats, and it's interesting because, I'm over on the right. You know what the name of the show is. I'm over here having this discussion about what's happening with the Democrats. And if you're listening to it, you probably think, well, you care, you want to preserve the Democratic Party. Well, yeah, I kind of do, because we need both sides, but not the current Democratic Party. In the same way they said that Donald Trump would split the Republicans. Do you remember that talk? That was back during the primary where Donald Trump was getting all of that free airtime all over, all of the networks were having him on because he was such a huge ratings draw. And they were just so excited about having him there. And it was just this thing where it seemed as if you couldn't turn your TV on if you watched, cable and not see Donald Trump or some discussion about Donald Trump. And everybody was just loving him to pieces, which is funny because some of the same people who loved him so much, they just loved him so much, they didn't know what to do without him. They thought about him in the morning, in the afternoon, at night. They were always saying his name. You know what I'm talking about, Joe and Mika. And now they are browbeating their guests. We'll hear this audio later in the show where they're browbeating their guests into saying what they want the guest to say, which is that he would never vote for Donald Trump. He's not even allowed to say he would rather vote for Donald Trump than a socialist, which is what he tried to say. You'll get to hear that for yourself. I thought it was stunning that Joe acted this way on his show. And I'm saying that, you guys have seen me cut up on this show. I cut up rough. When people come on here and act a fool, I will go there. I go in and there's no breaks. I'm going straight in. But this was kind of crazy to listen to because the guy was expressing something that was his genuine opinion, and Joe wouldn't even let him have it. And so, I'm on a tangent here, but look, why am I so concerned? Because people said Donald Trump would split the Republicans, and he kind of has, in a way, establishment Republicans and never-Trumpers. While there are fewer never-Trumpers than there were back in 2016, there's still a very vocal and strong group. They have some power, and they're in some areas where they can exert change. They're currently looking for someone to primary the president in 2020, which is just so ridiculous. Why would we waste the money on that? But on the Democratic side, there's always been, beneath the smooth surface of unity and love, there's always been a lot of catfighting going on between pro-life Democrats, who we see what happened to them. They were expelled. Between, the LGBT movement and the people they wanted to keep outside the camp, which were the transgenders who they felt were mentally ill, and pedophiles and people who want to marry more than one person. And they were told, shut up and let everybody in. We don't care what your feelings are. Just, this is a big tent. So will the Jewish Americans on the left have to say we're a part of a big tent that includes openly anti-Semite individuals, anti-Semitic individuals who want to see them destroyed? That's the question. When we get back, we'll have Blair Ellis from the RNC. Stay there.
The Arlington National Cemetery. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. On our Spiritual Heritage Tour in September, we'll be going to the Arlington National Cemetery, where we will visit the tomb of the unknown soldier. and the changing of the guard. What a moving ceremony that is. We'll spend several hours at the Arlington National Cemetery, what I consider really to be the crown jewel of our nation's capital. We're going to be going in September. We're going to be seeing all the sites in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. We'll also go to Mount Vernon, the home of George and Martha Washington. There's so much to do and see. We also have a Williamsburg, Jamestown, Yorktown part. If you'd like to go on that as well, you're welcome to do that in September. For all the information, simply visit the website spiritualheritagetours.com. spiritualheritagetours.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. Some years ago, I met a young man who shared with me an exciting idea he had for a new ministry. In fact, others heard about it and they wanted to support him. Some years passed and I ran into him again. But when I asked him about the progress on his idea and vision, he said he didn't act on it because he was waiting on the Lord, and he didn't want to run ahead of the Lord. Now, I don't want to be harsh, but I must admit I thought, what does waiting on the Lord have to do with this situation? And does he really think he can run ahead of the Lord? Let me balance that by saying, to be certain, we need to be wise, and we have to be careful about being compulsive. However, God's windows of opportunity are not always open. In Joshua chapter 18, verses 2 and 3, Joshua really rebukes the people for not getting it in gear. Listen to what he says. And there remained among the sons of Israel 7 tribes who had not divided their inheritance. So Joshua said to the sons of Israel, how long will you put off entering to take possession of the land which the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given you? In other words, Joshua is saying, what's the deal? What are you waiting for? God's not going to serve you everything in life on a silver platter. He wants us to think, to use our minds, to use what he's given to us, and to act on what he said. Plus, God's will always requires faith. Here's what I want you to remember today. Don't shrink back from the opportunities God has placed before you. Yes, pray, get godly counsel, but there comes a time when you must act. Go after it.
Crawford Loritz is senior pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in suburban Atlanta, Georgia. A transcript of today's Legacy Moment is available online at livingalegacy.org. livingalegacy.org.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Oh, welcome back to the program. So you guys know, last week I was at CPAC, and it was just so much fun. And one of the best parts of CPAC was that I got to meet some of the people at the RNC who work in the comms area that I hadn't had a chance to meet before. And so it was just like, it's awesome when you get to meet people that you haven't had a chance to meet before, but you've been working with them online and, you know, they've been coming on the show, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is really fun because I got to talk to Cassie Smedley and others from the RNC. And my hope is that I'll get to see them again at other conferences that are coming up later in the summer. And so it's my pleasure to welcome, instead of Alice Stewart, who is actually, she has a weather delay on the train, so she's unable to make it today, but Blair is stepping in. Blair Ellis, who's one of the spokespersons for the Republican National Committee. Blair, thank you for joining us today.
The pleasure is all mine, and I could only hope to be so lucky that we will get to hang out. CPAC was a blast last week, like you mentioned. I can't believe it's already come and gone, but
I know.
It's always fun to put faces with names.
It is. I thought, you know, so there were so many people there, but it was also, for it to be that many people, it was still kind of intimate because I just was bumping into people left and right and saying hi. It's some people I hadn't seen for years and years, and others I'd literally just seen them. You know, you kind of see each other, quote unquote, on Skype, but then you see someone in person. It's just so much better.
It totally is, and it's so fun. CPAC, I feel like, is just one of the few times a year, if the only time a year, where you've got all the best conservatives in kind of one big building, and it's just nice to be able to kind of know that you're surrounded by so many different friends and allies, and everyone's on the same team, and we're all fighting for the same things. And it definitely is one of those events where you leave feeling feeling a little more of a pep in your step, if you will. And I certainly felt that way last week after CPAC.
Yeah, a lot of energy. I felt energized for the show because I got to interview people in person, which I know normally I don't get to do. It's just always by phone. So it was nice to actually sit next to people and see their faces while they were talking. So I hope to do that more. But one of the things that's going on right now that's super exciting is, now I'm not a demographic box person. It's Women's History Month. But one of the things that we can do is we can take advantage of scenarios where we don't really have control over whether or not it's Women's History Month or what liberals and feminists will do with it. But we on our side can definitely educate, and we can take advantage of this focus and concentration to discuss issues that are important and try to get new, correct information out there. And so Women's History Month is going on. What is actually the focus for the RNC with this, and especially the White House?
So for us, it's just an opportunity to talk, number one, about the soaring economy and how this created under Trump. We've been able to create opportunity to really lift up some, different groups of people within society. And there's a big talk and big push right now on just all the awesome programs and initiatives the Trump administration is championing to empower women. We've got the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, and we've got the Women Connect Challenge, and then we've got Ivanka's Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative. And all of these are focused in one way or another on, honing in on women, and particularly women, whether it's in developing countries or countries where women just have yet to really reach their full potential. But our goal is to help them realize their economic potential and give them the resources and the tools they need to really help boost their economy and tap into the local workforce around them, and help them better utilize their talent, their ambition, and just everything that women naturally have. We want to help them harness that and get to a point where they can really help lift women up across the globe, and do it from a conservative kind of policy standpoint where we're empowering them. We're not giving them anything. We're empowering them. We're helping them find the tools, the education, the resources they need to lift themselves up.
So I love that. I think that's fantastic because we actually have one of the lowest women's unemployment rates in the history. Like, it's been decades since it's been this low for women. And also there's this wonderful economic boom that's impacting women in a positive way all over the country. Women are investing, opening businesses, and doing things they normally, with a down economy, just aren't able to do. And that is due to policies implemented by the Trump administration, namely the business tax cut, the decreases in regulation, and a lot of things we're seeing from them that we just wouldn't have seen if it was Hillary Clinton.
Totally. And to your point about the unemployment numbers, it's the lowest rate in 65 years for women. Unemployment is at 3.8%. That is incredible. That is something absolutely to be celebrated, whether it's Women's History Month or not. But to that same point, we've seen more than 2 million women enter the workforce since Trump was elected. And I think, again, this just speaks to the type of pro-growth job opportunities, initiatives that have been put forth by the Trump administration, and we're seeing it reflected in how well our economy is doing. Tax reform, deregulation, coupled with focus on, connecting American workers with American jobs, that has really helped spur these low unemployment numbers across every demographic. And that is something to be celebrated on top of all the other good the administration's doing. I think the fact that we're helping get more Americans back to work, and that we've got so many different initiatives right now really focused on connecting private sector with the need to employ those who have yet to find work. And that has been and will continue to be a big focus of the Trump administration moving forward.
And I'm looking forward to that. So there's another kind of big deal that's been going on, and I've seen Ivanka Trump at a number of public events this week and at the end of last week, where she's been championing workforce development, which is something that I think it kind of gets short shrift in the media because it's hard work that takes years to create, develop, get off the ground, and then you have to kind of continually update. It's like continuing education, but it's more than that because this is retraining. It encompasses a lot of different things. And I think people get bored talking about it because it's not, you can't just say, okay, we did workforce development, for a month last year and we retrained, 800,000 people and now they're working. You don't get results like that in a month. It takes time. And so people don't want to talk about it. But Ivanka Trump is really, like, she's been on this since the first moment she entered the White House to work there. And so what's going on with that?
Absolutely. And you're right. A lot of times this kind of stuff falls by the wayside because it's not, snazzy enough for some of the mainstream media. But this workforce advisory or American Workforce Policy Advisory Board was really launched this past week, but it's composed of industry, education, government officials, and everyone who's on the board is highly focused on bringing Americans off the sidelines and back into the workforce. And there's a couple different elements to it, but one of the main goals is develop this big campaign that allows us to promote multiple pathways to good-paying jobs, and dispelling this myth that there's only one way to a successful career. But another focus of the board too is improving the availability of high-quality, timely data that's available to students and educators. We also want to modernize candidate recruitment and training practices, and we want to encourage employer-led training and investment. And so, again, a lot of this is about working with the private sector and helping them and tapping into them so that we can train, educate, and uplift those who are unemployed or those who are seeking maybe to change their careers. Maybe they're looking to do something different or enter a new field. We want to help give them the tools and the resources they need to be able to take on a new task or a new challenge.
So, in short, Blair, workforce development it's integral to maintaining and growing we have a very diverse and talented workforce in this country, but we want that to grow. And we don't want to have to be so reliant on foreign labor, people coming here on visas to work. And workforce development helps us to get to that goal, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. And Ivanka Trump did a really awesome interview over the weekend where we talked about one of the reasons that we need to see the private sector kind of step up and help invest in America's workforce is because of all the technology and automation that we kind of continue to see take place. It's transforming our employment landscape. And we're at a point where we've really got to talk to our private sector and figure out, technology is exciting, but it is disruptive, and we need to make sure that we're working hand in hand with them to get a feel for where are your needs in this company. Where do you feel like you need more of a hands-on approach to training to get people to a point where they can step into this new role or this new job. We just have to make sure that we're staying on top of how quickly automation is displacing people, and we want to stay ahead of that. And so part of that is really just making sure that we are talking to the private sector constantly and getting a feel for what their needs are, where they need help filling those holes in their companies, and how we can better communicate to slot in people to those opportunities and to give them a leg up. And so that's a big focus as well, is really tapping into the private sector and making sure that we're utilizing them so that we can get more Americans back to work.
So that's actually super exciting. I wish more people would talk about it.
Right. I know. But it's, to your earlier point, though, it's something that is not a small feat. It's something that, it's launching, and it's been, to even get to a point where you can launch it, it takes a tremendous amount of behind-the-scenes work and effort from the first family. And the fact that we're finally at a point where we're able to really dive into some of the more nitty-gritty details of this is exciting. But you made the point earlier, this isn't something that just happens overnight. I mean, this will definitely take a couple months at least, if not years, to really get going. But what's important is that we've got the Trump administration and Ivanka and others who are really leading the way, saying, look, our unemployment's low, but we can get that number lower. Let's not let this be the best we can be. And part of that, too, is just staying one step ahead of the pace that the economy moves and the pace that automation moves. And we've got some awesome leaders in the White House that are really making sure that we're staying on top of those discussions so that we can keep Americans employed.
I love it. It's something that if we weren't talking Mueller investigation, Mueller report pre-sales on Amazon, if we weren't talking about so-called collusion, so-called obstruction, people who've done wrong things like Manafort and Cohen getting prosecuted for those things, and nothing to do with Russian collusion, of course, but we have to talk about all that stuff, which is like talking about Rice Krispie treats instead of talking about, pot roast. The main event is workforce development. The workforce development's the pot roast. And those stories are like the Rice Krispie treats. Sure, they're sugary. Sure, your head was going to hurt later and you're going to have a sugar spike, but you're still going to be hungry after that. We need to talk about this more.
Right, and I think too you hear it more from members of Congress when they're back in their districts and they're meeting with constituents or they're holding town halls. Constituents are not talking about the DC inside the Beltline things like the Mueller investigation. They're wanting to know, well, hey, let's talk about what are you tangibly doing to create more jobs, to grow our economy, to help families save a little bit more money. What are you doing to help kids pursue higher education or to pursue, a career in the tech field or the tech industry? Parents and families aren't interested in a lot of the sugary stuff that media pundits and pollsters want to talk about. They're interested in what is DC doing to tangibly improve the state of things, and how are we working to improve the lives of everyday Americans? And these workforce development initiatives are an incredibly important way we're actually working for the American people. And I think that lucky for us, we have folks like you who allow us to kind of share that message. But this is the real stuff that matters. These are the real initiatives and policies that are helping to bring down unemployment, that are helping to boost consumer confidence, that are helping to increase wage growth, which we just saw, again, take place this morning when those jobs numbers came out. So these are the types of policies, initiatives, programs that really matter and that really have an effect on, the everyday average working American.
And the reason why I'm so excited about talking about it is because, I want to cover everything. But I also noticed that there's a lot of people that when I bump into them and they're never Trump, it's because they have no idea that he's done anything great since he's been the president. And I'm not here to make people like him or dislike him, but I do think they should be informed. And when I start sharing, they're like, well, where did you hear that? I'm like, from the White House? Like they actually put stuff out. You can this is, I'm just too busy to make this stuff up. And I'm not that creative. I'm pretty creative. Google. But yeah. Well, Google, Bing, whatever your search engine is, you don't feel like you have to use what I'm using, but you could definitely find this out if you wanted to. And they're just inundated with the stuff from CNN, MSNBC, et cetera. And they just don't have any filter for it. And so they hear that Trump is the devil and he's never doing anything good. And he's also putting people on cattle cars. And they're like, wow, that's pretty terrible. And then they just pump their gas, buy groceries, go home, do whatever they're going to do. This is crazy that this kind of development, which is so important to our economy, is going on. And people, if they're not listening here and they're not listening to other outlets where you're going and sharing this, they're not hearing it. And I think that's a travesty.
Nope, I totally agree. And all it takes is a quick Google, per se, to make sure that people are feeling a little bit more informed about things. But, truly, when you start looking at what this administration is doing, and we saw with today's jobs report that we're getting more and more Americans off the sidelines. Today's report was the 7th straight month of 3% or better wage growth. National unemployment remains at or below 4% for 12 straight months. That is the longest streak in almost 50 years. Hispanic unemployment this past month reached a record low at 4.3%. Those are numbers that are undeniable, and we only can hope that they're starting to kind of translate beyond the DC bubble somehow. But this is, again, these are all because of the awesome initiatives and development, workforce positive, initiatives that the Trump administration is putting forth. That's why we're able to see such great numbers transform this economy and put Americans on better footing than they were 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Well, y'all heard it here. Share it in the podcast. Tell a friend, and you don't have to tell them in a mean way. You can just say, wow, that Trump administration workforce development, or go in soft, go in pretty, say, Ivanka Trump's workforce development announcements are pretty awesome, especially for Women's History Month. And that'll get them talking. Yes. Then you can tell them what you learned here today. That's a good hook. She's gorgeous. And then once they're thinking about her, they won't be angry. And then you can tell them the truth about the workforce development. It's a perfect segue. Blair Ellis, RNC spokesperson, thank you for coming on today.
The pleasure was all mine. Thank you for having me, Stacy.
All right, we'll talk again soon. And we will be back with your calls at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Stay there.
What does it take to be a sports success and a team player? Here's Pro Football Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy with today's Uncommon Moment.
Only 3 people in football history have won Super Bowl rings as both a player and a head coach. Myself, Tom Flores, and Mike Ditka. But unlike Flores and I, Mike Ditka was inducted into the Hall of Fame on the strength of his playing career, and he helped the Cowboys win Super Bowl VI. But after a 3-year stint coaching the New Orleans Saints to 3 losing seasons, Ditka told reporters, God puts people in places for reasons, and he probably put me here to be humble. I deserve it. As a player, coach, and broadcaster, Iron Mike is an uncommon football mind who believes God always has a plan, both in victory and defeat.
Tony Dungy, best-selling author of Quiet Strength and the Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Here's what you've missed on Airing the Addisons.
The former house church pastor, Brother Fu, is talking about what's going on in China. He's talking about the Chinese government, how it's made its plan clear that they want to change Christianity in China into what they would call Chinese Christianity. Fu said that there would be a retranslation or a summary of the Old Testament with some Buddhist scripture and Confucian teachings and new commentary for the New Testament.
Airing the Addisons. Weekday morning, 6 to 8 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Now, if you're offended by this story, you should be offended by any new presentation of the gospel under any ethnic covering.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the reason we sometimes miss it is because we prefer us. There is no new gospel.
Man.
Securing America.
The Pentagon is defending the Trump administration's transgender military policy, which is currently blocked in court. Retired Air Force General James Stewart, who's performing duties of the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, told a House subcommittee,
the new policy ends the practice of providing special accommodations for individuals with a history or diagnosis of gender dysphoria and transition-related treatment.
General Stewart said the policy treats all medical conditions equally. Maryland Democrat Anthony Brown says it sounds like don't ask, don't tell.
We are not talking about heart surgery and diabetes. We are talking about a group of Americans who identify as transgender.
President Trump has argued the Pentagon should not be paying for sex reassignment surgeries. The issue is ultimately expected to be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
And in South Florida, police are investigating a traffic stop turned human smuggling case. They say the driver pulled into an apartment complex and bailed out with a passenger Tuesday. Both were eventually caught. 12 people in the United States illegally were found inside the truck and its bed. They were detained and turned over to Border Patrol. One of them was a Salvadoran national convicted of manslaughter in New Jersey. Police say that truck was stolen out of Pasadena, Texas.
So the truck stolen out of Pasadena, Texas, then taken out of the country and brought back in, packed to the gills with illegal aliens, to include some guy who was convicted of manslaughter while he was here the last time. But as I've been posting on Facebook all day, if you've been missing the sarcasm, the snark is still there for you to enjoy. Go and partake. I've been posting, nothing to see here. Keep it moving. Go get your bitter Starbucks and move it. Keep on moving on down the line. Nothing to see here. No crisis present. Yeah. So a couple housekeeping things. I was just posting on the YouTube live stream. And if you're listening on terrestrial radio, this is, we're so grateful for you. And I encourage you to become one of our, when you donate to AFR or purchase any of our products over at afr.net at the store where we have fantastic things there for you. You can actually then partake in the town hall phone calls that happen. They're quarterly and they're led by Mr. Tim Wildman. He's the head of our organization here of American Family Association, which is the parent of American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. And last night they had a fantastic call. I believe it's because I came on and then my phone started acting up, so I had to disconnect and reconnect. But I heard most of it, like almost everything but that last like couple minutes at the beginning. And I know I heard Abraham Hamilton III was doing some policy updates, and they were kind of celebrating some victories that we've had in the culture war. And so if you want to get those quarterly calls, you got to go on. It's for donors, it's for partners, anyone who's partnered with us on anything, you get onto the list, and then you get the automated message from Tim Wildman himself. He actually calls you and gives you a reminder that the call is coming up. And then he calls you on the day of the call and connects you up, and you get to listen in. And it's always 30 minutes, no more, no less. So it's a quick call that you can actually fit into your evening schedule. It's after dinner time. And it was a great call last night, very encouraging. And so I think that's fantastic to do, but of course, completely up to you. And then, of course, we have Share-a-thon coming up in April, which is going to be super exciting because I'm going to be down in Tupelo for that, broadcasting live from the actual syndicator, y'all. I'm going to be down there. And the other thing is we're still working on, and I know it's taken quite a while, but this is something that this is my first time doing this, and I have hired a internet, a design company to help me with it. But we have to get this right for us to have the live stream. Instead of giving our live stream to Facebook and YouTube, it's, and Periscope, where if I say illegal alien, then they, on Facebook, they actually limit the share button. I've had people message me with pictures of, they'll have the live stream. It's a screen capture of the live stream of the show, and they actually can't hit the share button. The share button is disabled. They can't share it. And you just saw the story from Project Veritas where they have a whistleblower from inside Facebook who says it's called deboosting. The algorithm is supposed to search for live murders and rapes and violence that happen on Facebook. People live stream murders all over the world, depraved, absolutely just the worst of the worst. These people do that, and so they have to set up these automated systems within the computers at Facebook to catch those so that people, as you're scrolling down your feed, you don't see a live stream of a rape or a murder. And so they have a full-time operation that's all over the world. They have these call centers, and they're third-party contractors that come in and do this work for Facebook. But while they were doing that, when they realized we can set up an algorithm for this, we can help out our live screeners and moderators, they also realized, well, we can set this up to anytime someone says illegal alien, anytime someone says socialist, anytime someone says one of the buzzwords we don't like political correctness or infanticide or pro-life or pro-abortion, anything we don't agree with, we can set the algorithm up to catch it. And then when we catch it, we'll disable the share buttons, we'll deboost that stream. So instead of her reaching 7,000 or 8,000, which if you think about it, roughly 10% of the 80,000 people on my Facebook page, I should be able to show a live stream to them on a daily basis. And I know that I have that kind of reaching capability because we've had streams bigger than that. I remember I used to stream once a week and get 18,000 people to listen to it, to watch it on Facebook. Now the stream is 1,000, 1,100, 2,100. Sometimes it's 3,000. On a really heavy news day, we'll get 4,000 or 5,000. We can do better than that. And we can provide you reliability where if you want to share the live stream and it's going to stacyontheright.com, you can just copy the line, the actual internet address, and post it wherever you want. And so you'll have more control. We will have more control. And there won't be an algorithm determining if the content that we're sharing on a day-to-day basis is worthy to be shown to anyone. You can decide to come to my website. You can decide to watch the stream. You can decide not to. It'll be up to you and you alone, as opposed to giving all of this power over to YouTube and Facebook. It's just crazy. The other thing is it's a perfect time for this change, because I don't know if you guys saw the story out there about Facebook. The owner of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, has actually said that he believes that the Snapchat formula, he didn't use the word Snapchat formula, but it is, if you have teenagers, you know what Snapchat is. It's instant messaging. It's encrypted. It's basically you choose the number of people to share it with. So instead of sharing publicly, everything's private, and you're only sharing with a select group of people. And Facebook owner, Mark Zuckerberg, feels that's the way Facebook is going. So no more of this public posting, no more, scrolling through and seeing a friend of a friend and clicking on their page and seeing all of their public posts. No more of that. You'll only have the capability to share within a network of people who you've chosen, who also have chosen to receive your information. And that will be how, and then of course things will disappear. There's no more storing of years worth of data like you do on Facebook. No more of this kind of village concept where anybody can walk in and meet anybody else. It's going to be much more controlled. And he has said that he feels like that's the future of Facebook. Well, that kind of sounds like online publishers like myself and news organizations that put out content will have a hard time reaching anybody if it's a closed loop. Like, how will you reach anyone? You'll only be able to share with people who choose to have been shared with, as opposed to right now where any person who's watching this live stream who doesn't even like the page can share it, and other people that they know will see it, and I don't have anything to do with it. All I'm doing is putting on the stream. So it's an appropriate time to start looking at some other options for making the content available to you when you would like it on your terms. In other words, you don't like it, you cut it off. You like it, you turn it on. Instead of having Facebook decide they're going to show you that I'm live streaming, or they're not going to show you I'm live streaming for 2 years, which is I've told you guys this. I've gotten direct messages from people who said, I had no idea you were still on the radio. You're doing so well. I can't believe it. I'm like, what do you mean? I've been here the whole time. Oh, I haven't seen a notification from you in, it's been like 2 years. I actually was just thinking, I wonder whatever happened to Stacy on the right. And so I typed it in, and here you are. You've been here the whole time. So, I mean, you know how it is, out of sight, out of mind. I don't blame anybody for that kind of stuff. If you're expecting Facebook to show you notifications and you've selected get notifications and they don't show you, you're going to assume, oh, well, she just must not be publishing anything anymore. I mean, come on, fast-paced life. So hopefully this new change, I'm not even going to say hopefully, prayerfully, this new change is going to bring about an ability for people to get the content that they want here on the show, to access us. And you'll still, obviously, our primary mode of dissemination is radio, all of the terrestrial stations here at American Family Radio, and our other, we have some affiliates outside of that, just a few. And we're so grateful to be able to do that. So that's what we're going to be focused on. But I wanted to make that announcement so you could kind of get ready. If you catch us on the radio, and when you can't catch us on the radio, you go back and you watch the live stream, you won't be finding it in like a zillion different places where it is now. But that will also mean a higher quality of streaming, because we won't be streaming to so many different locations. So there's a bunch of different benefits to doing it this way. And if you're wondering why my shirt says nobody on the top, it says nobody likes a soggy bottom, because me and my family are completely obsessed with the Great British Baking Show, the greatest British baker. It's an unbelievably funny show, and it's fun to watch. And the soggy bottom refers to a pie in which the crust was not the perfect thinness and cooked to perfection, and also created to perfection with the butter and the everything that goes into it. And then when it's baked, if the items that are put into it are too wet, so fruit, meat, whatever the pie is made of, if those ingredients are too wet, the bottom of the pie will not be crisp and flaky, it will be soggy. And the Brits refer to that as a soggy bottom, and it's a pie. And so the shirt actually has a pie on the front. I'll put a picture on Instagram so you guys can see. So anyway, that's the kind of Friday mood I'm in. I wore this shirt to the doctor's office this morning, and everyone was like, wait, that shirt? I'm like, yes, it is from the Great British Baking Show. And a couple of the ladies in the waiting room knew the show, and we were all just like a bunch of little hens cackling and talking about the show and how much we liked it. So anyway, that is what's going on with that. And I do too. I have to say, I actually like the pie to be soggy on the bottom, but I'm an American, so what are we gonna do? So the audio we heard coming in from this break was obviously this traffic stop leading to the human smuggling bust, and DHS Secretary Nielsen has been out all this week having discussions about what's going on at the southern border, trying to bring some truth and clarity to this issue. And one of the things she said this week was that ICE interdicted enough fentanyl in 2018 to kill every American twice. And remember, fentanyl is what the drug cartels in all of these South American countries, specifically Mexico, they lace the heroin with fentanyl because it boosts the strength of the drug. But what happens is if they're not very careful about how much fentanyl they put in, it actually kills people because it is extremely strong. And the fentanyl itself that's where the overdoses are coming from. The people are not overdosing as often on heroin itself. It's the fentanyl. So someone who has been using heroin for a while and tries to use more of it to get the same result, and the heroin that they try to use more of is laced with fentanyl, it results in an overdose. And we're talking about 75,000 of those for the last reportable year. 75,000 Americans who overdose. You've seen the pictures of 2 kids strapped into the car seats in the back seat, the parents in the front seat, both of them dead over heroin overdoses. Kids in the back, alive and screaming, like they can't unhook themselves, and they're in the car, and the parents are dead, and the police find them. This is what's going on in America today. Now, I know, depraved human condition. I get it. We're never going to have a society where everybody's behaving perfectly and there's no death, no murders, none of that. It's never going to happen while we're here on this earth. But we can certainly say we know that an open border means more people coming into the country who are here to do one thing, and that's traffic drugs and human beings. And so in order to stop that, we're going to put a wall up. And when we put that wall up, that's going to funnel these illegal entrants into our lawful points of entry where they will still try to smuggle drugs in. But because our agents won't be running up and down open fields trying to catch people in trucks and getting gunned down, because, our agents actually come under gunfire and stuff from these gangs, these drug cartels. Then once everybody's coming in through the lawful points of entry, then we will be able to stop more of this drugs coming into the country. And these guys are already doing an amazing job. They're already stopping huge shipments of heroin laced with fentanyl, straight up fentanyl. They're totally stopping this stuff and confiscating it. So it's not like they're not doing the best they can. These guys are doing everything they can. And we still got this going on. So we're going to have to save that next audio for later. And I did give out the number for calls, but it's Friday, and y'all might just be enjoying the listening experience, which I totally feel you. The other things I wanted to kind of just touch base on really quickly as we're in the last minute of the show here. It's exciting. We love talking to Dr. Craig Albert. He's going to be back with us next week. He's the former president of the Georgia Political Science Association. He is a graduate director of intelligence and security studies at the Augusta University. And what's important about that is when Dr. Albert comes on, we normally talk about North Korea and national security and foreign policy, and this time will be no different. That will be a part of our discussion on Monday on the show, and so I'm excited to talk to him. And then, of course, we are going to have other great guests coming in next week. For the big kind of to-do for today, it's been that the president went down to Beauregard to visit the site of the tornadoes, and it was really just a spate of really bad weather. And, our hearts go out to them. We have to pray for them and look for opportunities to send relief and aid when those become available. But my encouragement for you this weekend, if you're leaving us now, is, well, today it's 44 here in St. Louis, and I've already been outside a couple times because I'm just like, what? The snow is killing me. And I'm so glad to be able to just breathe the air in deeply because it's not icy cold, 11 degrees. Try to get outside and definitely get in the pew and just get that refill. And if you're going through anything, God is for you. Rely on him. He won't fail you. He won't let you down. If you're sticking around, you have One News Now, news and information up next.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
AFA Action Alerts. When you subscribe, we'll notify you once or twice a week about a critical issue facing our country. AFA Action Alerts have been very successful in influencing legislation, as well as getting positive results from America's Fortune 500 companies. Subscribe to your AFA Action Alerts today. Go to afa.net and click on the Resources tab.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, almost DP. President Trump is visiting storm-ravaged Alabama this afternoon. The White House says Trump will get an aerial view of some tornado damage after a series of destructive storms hit Alabama Sunday. Nearly 24 people were killed. The president is also expected to meet with some first responders, local and state officials, and storm victims. There are extreme avalanche warnings in the Colorado mountains. Jeff Manasso tells us more.
After another round of heavy snow, at least 3 major snowslides near Vail Pass along I-70 and Colorado 91 near Copper Mountain, where 4 vehicles were buried or pushed up embankments. A gas line also ruptured.
The sign kept saying Interstate 70 West closed at Frisco.
I have never seen something like this ever since all my 43 years that I've lived.
I-70 since reopened, though major mountain corridors remain shut down, like I-91, US 6 near Loveland Pass, and parts of US 5. Corridors that are under a winter storm warning, with travelers advised to use extreme caution. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Christian Medical Association has a request before the U.S. Supreme Court. Chris Woodward tells us why.
Indiana had a law that required a woman have an opportunity to look at an ultrasound as part of informed consent before she made the decision on an abortion. An appeals court overturned that, and Christian Medical Association is asking the U.S. Supreme Court to review that ruling. Dr. David Stevens of Christian Medical Association.
A woman cannot make an informed consent decision without knowing what kind of decision she's making. I remember my wife was going to have surgery, and they brought in the CT scan and showed her where the problem was, and this is what we're going to do, and here are the risks, and here are the benefits, and she made a decision. Well, in abortion, often that is not required. Planned Parenthood and other organizations are very opposed to ultrasound being showed to women. Why? Because 80 to 90% of the time they make a decision not to abort once they see the beating heart and the baby moving. So this is good medicine, and it's also good for life.
According to the Guttmacher Institute, 14 states require verbal counseling or written materials to include information on accessing ultrasound services. 26 states regulate the provision of ultrasound by abortion providers.
If this is not looked at by the Supreme Court, it could overturn the laws in many states.
I'm Chris Woodward.
The suspect in the recent violent attack on a conservative on the UC Berkeley campus has been arrested and charged with 3 felonies and a misdemeanor. Bob Kellogg has more.
28-year-old Zachary Greenberg is accused of physically assaulting Hayden Williams on February 19th at a recruiting table for Turning Point USA, according to Campus Reform. Brad Dacus of the Pacific Justice Institute says Greenberg, who has pleaded not guilty, could face serious jail time if convicted.
Hopefully, the community in UC Berkeley will send a loud message that this kind of violence has serious consequences that no one will be able to escape from.
Dacus says even though a heavy sentence could backfire on conservatives, if leftists use that to turn Greenberg into a martyr, that should not be considered in adjudicating this case.
The fact that this is in Berkeley, the fact that this was a conservative who was struck and assaulted in no way should be a factor in this suspect getting off easy.
I'm Bob Kellogg.
A parent's decision not to vaccinate their child is resulting in a medical bill of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
A 6-year-old Oregon boy is alive, having survived a tetanus infection. The child spent 2 months in the hospital after getting a cut on his forehead while playing on a farm. That eventually led to the boy's jaw locking up, his muscles spasming, and his neck arching. According to reports, the boy was completely unvaccinated. Now, the hospital says the cost of his inpatient care and his outpatient rehab is exceeding $800,000. While physicians treated the boy using the tetanus vaccine, his parents are refusing to give him a booster. Eben Brown, Fox News.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, "The sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do." In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We have our military sent to the border. We have 8,000 military personnel right now at the border. We are doing an amazing job considering it's really an onslaught.
Apparently, this is not what Representative Omar said. It's what she believes. And if she believes that, she ought to just own up to it and stop pretending. I guess Speaker Pelosi today couldn't decide whether Omar is an anti-Semite or if she's stupid.
This is a time of testing for the House of Representatives. And if I may, it's really a moral test about how clearly they will speak out, in this case, against what Congresswoman Omar said, which was clearly anti-Semitic.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Oh yeah, I'm giggling when I hear Kellyanne Conway, because she just always cuts it right down to the bare bone. She's brass tacks only. She does not play around with. She doesn't mince words, and it's fantastic. We're going to have Davis Richardson, a policy reporter from The Observer, observer.com, talking about Trump's announcement for an executive order protecting free speech on college campuses. This should be pretty interesting, I got to tell you. And then we are going to continue our discussion from last segment. We actually ran out of time. So it's this audio from Donnie Deutsch. Now, I actually feel sorry for him, because I think he wouldn't be so extreme if he wasn't really relying on being a contributor over there at CNN. And those contributor checks are pretty it's not a pittance. It's nothing to laugh at. You're not going to get a contributor contract from there and be like, I could take it or leave it. And it's really, I think, impacting the way people behave on the network, because they're not just looking for you to come on and comment. If you're a contributor, they're paying you to come on and present a specific point of view. Now, that's not that unique. When you're a contributor to Fox News, if you're on the left and they give you a contributor contract, they're not paying you to come on and be pro-Trump. They're paying you to come on and present your perspective as a person who's on the left. Nothing wrong with that. But on CNN, they seem to have this tack that you can be almost anything as long as you're anti-Trump. So you can actually, Mia Love is anti-Trump. And we saw the exchange when she lost. She hadn't been pro-Trump, during her campaign. And the president kind of made a statement like, you didn't give me any love, and so you ain't getting no love. Donnie, I'm sorry. I said he was on CNN. Donnie, thank you, Devin. Donnie is actually on MSNBC. MSNBC guest Donnie Deutsch. But it's the same thing over at MSNBC. So if you're on Mika and Joe's program, you're not pro-Trump. If you're on Morning Joe as a regular, not only you're not pro-Trump, but you have to exhibit some Trump derangement syndrome. You have to say wild and outlandish things about him, or you're not getting invited back. Right? You're not getting invited back. So you have to take what he's saying with a grain of salt, and you have to think about how nice those checks are. And I'm not condoning it, but I'm explaining some of what we're seeing and hearing from him, because it's not the way he was. If you watch old clips of Donnie Deutsch, yeah, he would say something, outside the pale every now and again, but it wasn't this, it's almost like he's stuck in a feedback loop where every so many hours he has to spit out something just crazy about President Trump. The wildest, ridiculous statements. If he doesn't spit it out, it's almost like a verbal tick for him. And it just keeps happening. So here he is. He says, he calls Trump evil. This was like weeks ago. He said that President Trump was evil. Well, here he is he says he would vote for him if the choice were a socialist and President Trump. He says he would vote for him. And then listen for what Joe Scarborough says to him after that. He literally makes him take it back. It's number 2.
I find Donald Trump reprehensible as a human being, but a socialist candidate is more dangerous to this country as far as strength and well-being of our country than Donald Trump. I would vote for Donald Trump, a despicable human being.
No, you won't.
Let me tell you
Stop
something.
yourself.
Let me
Stop
correct myself.
yourself.
Thank you. You always help myself.
You will never vote for a bigot, a guy that's made bigoted statements for the past 3 years.
Joe, thank you for correcting me. I stand corrected that. I will be so distraught to the point that could even come out of my mouth if we have a socialist, because that will take our country so down. And we are not Denmark. I love Denmark. That's not who we are. And if you love who we are and all the great things that still have to have binders put on the side, please step away from the socialism. And let me correct myself. I will never vote for Donald Trump. Thank you.
What he said made sense. He was making an ultimatum to the Democrats, and it had teeth. If Donnie Deutsch, who is an avowed liberal and hates Donald Trump, with the hate of 1,000 suns, with a 1,400-degree volcanic hate, a lava type of a hatred that burns everything in its path and sends up ash that pollutes the atmosphere for, a decade afterwards, the kind of hatred that literally burns through human beings and puppies and, pretty decor. Like, if he hates Donald Trump that much, but he says if the Democrats run a socialist, he's going to vote for Donald Trump. That is the dividing line with which the Democrats could say, okay, wait a minute now. You're saying to me that if we run a socialist, if we keep on down the socialist path, people like Donnie Deutsch, an MSNBC contributor, someone who he couldn't imagine himself voting for Donald Trump or a Republican if it meant it would save his life or a limb or one of his loved ones, he would actually go down that path and go pull the lever for Trump. If we take that tack, the Democrats would get into one of those big war rooms, the huge conference room with like 40 seats around the table, and they'd get in there and they would argue and arm wrestle and poke each other in the eye with pencils until they got down to brass tacks and figured out how they could run a campaign that was progressive, as they say, and liberal, as they say, all euphemisms for heading towards communism, but whatever. They would figure out a way to do it without being socialist. They would actually have to decide. They'd have some consultant run the numbers. Some pollster would say, Donnie Deutsch represents this kind of American. And according to our study notes and everything that we know about the American electorate, this many hundreds of thousands or this many million Americans are what we would call Donnie Deutsch Democrats. And so people like him, they number in this amount. And that amount is, yes, enough to sway an election, or it's not enough to sway an election. Who cares? There's only 10,000 Donnie Deutsch Democrats. Who cares if he votes for Trump? We ain't worried about him. But they don't have to do that if they have Joe Scarborough to come in. And remember, I have to make the point here, because you might be listening and thinking, Joe Scarborough, he's a Democrat. No, he isn't. He's a Republican. Joe Scarborough was a Congress member. He was a Republican Congress member before he went on television. So, dude is not exactly your typical Democrat. And listen to the way he literally lit Donnie Deutsch on fire. Check yourself. Correct yourself. You ain't voting for Donald Trump. He basically told the guy what he would do. If I was Donnie Deutsch, I'd have said, I'll vote for whoever I want to, Joe. It may be your show, but it's my vote. But Donnie Deutsch doesn't have that in him. He can't go hard in. He cannot defend himself because he's worried about his contract. I mean, there's something to be said about not having that problem. Sometimes, full disclosure, sometimes I think, well, what if I had really spent some time, and put up with a lot of the stuff that I had to go through with, the CNN or whatever, and gotten a contributor contract. They never last long for conservatives anyway, but what if I had been able to pull that off? That would be some really good money. It would, but they have a bit of control over you at that point. And so sometimes it's a blessing when you don't get, like, not every opportunity is a good one. And I just feel for him because he doesn't have the ability to have an opinion that disagrees with Joe Scarborough anymore. And that is a sad place to be. He's a grown man with gray hair. You know, he has his own life experiences. I don't respect his political views. I think the lies that he spews about President Trump are reprehensible, and he should be, held to a standard for that. But it is actually sad to see a grown man on television talking about his own opinion and making a statement that actually he was coherent at that point. You feel me? He was coherent. He made a statement that made sense. In his mind, a hardened leftist Democrat, if the Democrats dance with socialism and try to peddle it as their new ideology, he was saying, that's not for me. I don't want to live in a totalitarian state where fascism is the norm, where I can't express myself, or I can't disagree with him. He wanted to make a point, and he was shut down. He wasn't permitted to make it because Joe Scarborough's not going to let this guy have his own opinion. It's pretty amazing. Check yourself. Correct yourself. Correct yourself, Donnie. In other words, I'm not going to let you say that here on my show. And, there's something to be said about controlling what you're going to let people say. But he was just expressing his opinion. He didn't say no one should vote for the Democrats if they go to socialism. He said he wouldn't. Anyway, so then back to this Omar stuff. Newt Gingrich, he says Nancy Pelosi is losing, that she is losing control of the Democrats. Now, didn't Stephen Solomon say that yesterday? And I've been one, like earlier this week on another program that I go on regularly to provide commentary. I said that Nancy Pelosi was that person, that she was going to get the Democrats, the new freshmen, she was going to get them under control. But it's kind of looking like she's not getting them under control, because she has said before there's no room for anti-Semitism on the Democrat side. But now they issued this resolution. It didn't even denounce Omar. Not at all. It didn't even denounce her at all. So here it is, number 4.
There's a deep anti-Semitic, anti-Israeli bias on the left. There are a lot of people on the left who'd be very happy if Israel disappeared tomorrow, and who feel 100% on the side of Hamas, even while it's firing rockets at Israeli cities. So I think what we've seen is, over the last 30 years, a growth in the anti-Semitic behavior on college campuses, and a growing willingness by some Democratic politicians to be very openly anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. And I think the second thing is that a lot of the younger militant members, whether they're anti-Israel or not, they are deeply opposed to Nancy Pelosi trying to exercise any discipline at all. Look, she is losing control of the House. They may be forced in a desperation move to change the House rules to block Republicans from offering anything, which would, I think, lead to chaos. But she can't get her party to stay together. And if you're in a moderate district, if you're in a district that Trump carried, or if you're in a district that's heavily Jewish, and you're watching the Democrats go crazy, and you are a Democratic freshman running for re-election, this has to be a really decisive moment. Right. Who do you stay with?
Well, I mean, you would want to stay with who do you go to is what probably more accurate. Who do you go to if you're Jewish and you see your party straying into anti-Semitism and permitting it, and even promoting the people who are putting it out there? You have to be willing to say, I'm going where people don't believe that I have dual allegiances, and some of the worst things that when they're permitted to be said and they're let to stand, it encourages more anti-Semitism. Just to give you a perspective on who appreciates what Omar has said. Do you remember when David Duke had said something positive in the media about President Trump? It was back when he was a candidate. And that's when they started pounding the racism drum. President Trump has to be a racist because David Duke likes him. And so this was candidate Trump. He was saying, well, you know, I'm not denouncing anybody. I don't even know what he said, but I'm not denouncing anybody. I've already denounced racism. I'm not a racist. And people just were losing their minds. Well, David Duke said he thinks that Omar should be promoted to leadership because she's anti-Semitic. So now what? Now, what can people say now? Omar is supported by David Duke. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. When we get back, we'll have Davis Richardson from The Observer. Stay right there.
Are you still stuck on the healthcare roller coaster? Still paying those high premiums? And strapped into huge deductibles? Not knowing what's around the next turn? Well, then let me tell you about a sound, sensible healthcare choice that really is affordable. It's MediShare, the healthcare sharing solution people like you have been trusting in for more than 25 years. MediShare members report saving around $500 a month on their healthcare costs, and they never pay for things they don't believe in. Time to say goodbye to that healthcare roller coaster and say hello to MediShare.
Call ** 345 to find out how much you can save on your healthcare. MediShare. Call ** 345. Message and data rates may apply. That's ** 345.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson. You know, not only is the U.S. government in debt, but many of its citizens are in significant debt as well. Economists announced that credit card debt for Americans have now reached a new height of $1 trillion. Matt Schultz is senior industry analyst at creditcards.com. He says this record should serve as a wake-up call to Americans to focus on their credit card debt. He adds, even if you feel your debt is manageable right now, know that you could be one unexpected emergency away from real trouble. While I'm talking about credit card debt, let me also talk about other debts that Americans currently hold. The New York Federal Reserve recently released a report that estimated that the collective U.S. household debt is at about $12 trillion. Once again, this is a record and surpasses the previous amount back in the 2008 recession. The report also provides some context to American debt. Housing-related debt is down about $1 trillion since the 2008 peak. However, auto loan balances are $367 billion higher, and student loans are $671 billion higher. You know, in the past, we've talked about the growing problem of student loan debt, so let me focus a moment on auto loan debt. Americans struggle with this form of debt, especially because they are often using higher interest rates. Millions of these loans are in delinquency, and many people report taking out a loan with a repayment period longer than the time they plan to own the vehicle. In my book, Making the Most of Your Money in Tough Times, I talk about the dangers of debt. Proverbs 22:7 says, the rich rule over the poor, and a borrower is a servant to the lender. So many Americans are enslaved by debt. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Everybody, welcome back to the program. It's my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the show. We're going to be speaking with Davis Richardson. He's a policy reporter for The Observer. Davis, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Stacy.
Okay, so let's talk about this. This is an executive order protecting free speech on college campuses, and it's something that President Trump announced while he was speaking at CPAC in his kind of extended speech that he did there. So tell us what's going on here.
Sure. So when Trump was speaking at CPAC, that's the Conservative Political Action Conference last week, he said a lot of very newsworthy things in that address. He used some profanity sometimes, and there were a lot of policy news that came out of that. But one piece that has alarmed a little bit of academia is that Trump said that he wants to declare an executive order protecting free speech on college campuses. Now, details of this aren't really known on what shape and form that would necessarily look like. But when he gave this announcement at CPAC, he brought up Hayden Williams, who was a conservative activist who was assaulted at UC Berkeley's campus. And he brought him up, and the audience was a big fan of this, although a lot in academia are kind of like wondering now like what shape and form this executive order is going to take if he does in fact go through with it.
So I wonder as well, because I think what most Americans are looking for is for college campuses to offer the same accommodations to speakers, no matter what their political leanings, and let the students decide whether or not they want to go to an event. If no one shows up, then a speaker knows their views aren't welcome there. But if an organization of students wants to bring in a speaker, whether it's, a hardcore progressive Democrat or, Ann Coulter, either or, if the students are bringing that person in, it's not up to other students to say that person can't speak in a room at this campus. And that's what we've seen over and over and over again. If the universities would simply police this themselves, it wouldn't be such an issue. But clearly, people are getting sucker punched. There have been billions of dollars in property damage at colleges in the UC, University of California, their campuses. And across the country, we've seen armed security, armed guards, and lots of really, it's not American to say, you can't speak anywhere near me. That's anti-free speech.
Yes, it is. What I will also say is a lot of professors, both liberal and conservative, that I've spoken to about this, they do acknowledge that there is a problem that happens to a lot of conservative speakers on college campuses. Now, what's interesting about the president's announcement of an executive order is that he didn't really touch on what currently happens to a lot of conservative students and faculty. The example that he gave in citing the UC Berkeley case, it was actually a 28-year-old who was not affiliated with the university, as well as the attacker, who was also not affiliated with the university. So I think that a lot of conservative students and speakers who've been affected by a genuine problem that is happening on college campuses, they're wondering what form this is going to take. But they're also wondering, well, why didn't he address that in there? Why is this framed more so around conservative activism on campus rather than the invitation of speakers?
Well, I think that's a good question. I tend to think that the reason why he's framing it that way is because he has such a close relationship with Charlie Kirk, and there have been so many incidents surrounding Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA chapters bringing in speakers, and also Young Americans for Freedom. I can think of the College Republicans. A lot of groups that have invited conservative speakers in have seen the backlash when liberals have been permitted to come on campus and speak, and there hasn't been a corresponding backlash from conservative students. So it may be that just the prevalence and occurrence of the outbreaks of violence and the incidents seem to be brought about by an announcement that a conservative is coming to speak, and there is not a corresponding action on the right side of the spectrum in response to liberal speakers coming onto campus.
Sure. And again, it's about what form this ultimately takes, right? So a lot of people have said, well, if this executive order is declared and Trump does go forward with making this type of policy, are we going to see a government committee that is set up that is ultimately looking to police free speech on college campuses? Or is it going to be what Dinesh D'Souza said on Fox News last night, which is sending in National Guard troops whenever these types of incidences happen? So I think right now people really need clarity on what's going on, and everyone sort of has their own agenda that they're trying to push with this. But certainly some clarity from the White House and Betsy DeVos would certainly be beneficial, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you on the clarity, Davis. And I also think the spectacle of having to have National Guard troops coming in, that harkens the memory banks back to, integration for schools, where they had to have National Guard troops for, little kids to walk into school to basically integrate the school with just being there, necessitated troops being there. And that's a kind of frightening thing to think that in 2019, Americans are so intolerant of views they don't agree with that National Guard troops have to be sent in to ensure the safety of individuals who are trying to just go in and speak. There was actually a news story about one single Antifa protester with a bell who went into a college speaking event for a guy. He's not famous at all. I'm going to pull the story up here. I just thought of it while we were talking. He's ringing the bell and standing in front of the projector, so they can't put on the speech, and he just keeps ringing the bell and keeps standing there. He says he's a member of Antifa, and it's a conservative event at Portland State University. The police officers, the campus police officers, stood there and they said, we can't do anything to him unless he damages property or injures someone. And they allowed him to obstruct the speech for an hour. And at the 1 hour point, everyone just got up and left because they knew they weren't going to be able to hear the guy talk. And the speaker was a man who, I'm just looking here to see what it was, journalist Andy No, who was assaulted by an Antifa mob in Portland, attended the event in Portland State on Tuesday, and he tweeted out a series of video clips about the bell-ringing protester. And Michael Strickland was the speaker to discuss being sentenced to 40 days in jail and banned from carrying a gun after he brandished it. He had a concealed carry permit when masked left-wing protesters kind of surrounded him and, were yelling at him. And so he brandished his gun to get out of there, and they took his gun permit and said he can't carry a gun anymore.
Yeah, I mean, an Antifa protester like that, I mean, I don't think that anyone on the left or the right should be agreeing with the type of behavior that person is engaging in, especially with obstructing students who are trying to spread ideas of the like. But, I mean, I do question whether or not sending in, like, the National Guard as a response to that is necessarily appropriate, and a lot of conservative professors who I've spoken to about this, while they appreciate the president's sentiment toward a free speech, it's also against their own principles as conservatives, because they do worry that it would be more so the federal government coming in and looking to regulate different types of speech on campus and not leaving it to educators who have made this type of thing their entire work. So, I mean, I think that there definitely needs to be a change of policy in a lot of these universities and colleges, and maybe a framework on how to best going about so, like, speakers are able to come in without getting threatened, as we saw with the case of Middlebury and Charles Murray, and without also, like, having to resort to something like the federal government coming in and overhaul these universities.
I agree with you. I think you just summed it up pretty perfectly, because in my mind, so obviously I support the president, but I don't think so. The president is not your traditional Republican where, he's kind of steeped in the Constitution and limited government. He's more of a fixer, problem solver type person. So he sees a problem going on and he wants to fix it. And his current role is that of someone who's in the government. So that would be the avenue by which it would be fixed. But I don't like the government having say over colleges, that these are private institutions. They're not government schools. And they're supposed to be upholding the standards that make our nation great on their own. And so I just wonder if there isn't some other way to accomplish kind of reacclimating everything back to the free speech paradigm without having, as you said, National Guard troops or, some kind of government edict. I would prefer to see it happen from where it's actually happening. Donors maybe, alumni coming in and saying, look, we're not going to write any more checks, but that's not working. A lot of donors have already said, we're not going to write any more checks. And the schools are just like, yeah, but we're still going to do this because we can't have fascists or racists or whatever speaking on campus, of which the conservative speakers are not fascists. They're not racists, but that's what's being said.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But what I will say is that a number of private organizations, I mean, I still think that it's still too early to tell with this. Like the uptick in violence against speakers has been relatively recent. I also don't think that it's necessarily reserved only to conservative speakers. There have been cases of liberal professors also being targeted as well. But what I will say is that any time that you do an executive order of this nature, it makes the policy and realm a little bit less stable. You know, I mean, there are private organizations like the Heterodox Academy, which do a really good job at advocating for free speech and making sure that all ideas get to be spread. And if you introduce something like an executive order in there, it's an unstable way of governing. You know, that was how the Obama administration tackled immigration. And as a result, it's this policy realm, which is now completely volatile, that's still being governed by executive order. And when you introduce that to a subject of like education, we could see something similar happening in aggravating a crisis that may not have even existed to the extent that it ends up does.
So I agree with the statement that you're making about the change that governing by executive order made. President Obama actually opened kind of a Pandora's box in that arena, and now it's going to be really hard to get that shut. Like it's now the cat's out of the bag, and even though the changes he made were temporary, now legal challenges are making those changes much more permanent, and they're unconstitutional. So I was against it then. I don't like Congress leaving governing up to the executive. The legislative branch is supposed to create the laws, not the executive through executive orders. But you said that there were liberals who'd been attacked by conservatives on campus. Do you have any specific stories to support that assertion? Because I haven't seen any news stories about that.
There was a piece in Vox recently on a first-person account that had been written by a left-leaning professor where that had happened to. I can send you the exact link. I believe that it was an op-ed that was written.
He was speaking?
Well as, I mean, these conservative institutions like Turning Point USA, I mean, a lot of them are also like putting together like campus watch list professors, which in a way kind of does seem to embody kind of this McCarthyite, I don't want to use the word discrimination, but like means of targeting that they're also accusing the right of doing. I mean, I think that it goes both ways a little bit.
So I'm unaware of the lists, but if for Turning Point, you're saying Turning Point making lists of professors who are crushing free speech of students, or because I'm the only reason I would have I'm a little iffy on that, Davis, because the Southern Poverty Law Center creates lists too. The Southern Poverty Law Center actually has the organization that runs this syndication outfit, American Family Association, as a hate group. So I work for AFA, so I'm basically I work for a hate organization. I happen to be black. I know you can't tell by listening to me on this interview, but I'm not a member of a hate organization. AFA is not a hate organization. So when I hear people who are coming from a leftist perspective, and I'm not accusing you of that, but when I hear people who say I'm wary of lists or Turning Point has a list, and then but they're okay with the Southern Poverty Law Center having a list that, by the way, got someone shot at Family Resource Center, which is also not a hate group, but a guy went in and shot that place up because the Southern Poverty Law Center said it was a hate group. I think either we don't want any lists or lists are fine. I'm either or. I can't be in the middle on that one. And I honestly, we're going to have some whack jobs present at any juncture, but I think the instances of people who are activists on the left crushing free speech of conservative speakers, attacking and destroying billions of dollars in property, burning police cars, that kind of stuff, that is something that is really, it's situated on the left side of the political spectrum, and that has been documented over and over and over again. And I have no problem if it's someone on the right's doing it, send them to the gallows just like everybody else, prison time, whatever, prosecute them. But this is a problem that the left is having, and I don't see enough people speaking out about the fact that it really is coming from people who claim to be progressives, liberals, Democrats.
Right.
Well, I'd love to see more of that. I'd love to see people who have credibility like yourself calling out leftists about this kind of, it's a sustained spate of violence that we've kind of seen rise up through Occupy Wall Street, and it's just not going away.
Right. And as I said a little bit ago, I mean, conservative professors that I've spoken to who have personally been affected by this, one of the professors, he was actually one of mine from college. His name's Sam Abrams, and his office was vandalized after he published a relatively tame op-ed in the New York Times saying that there's a left-leaning bias among campus administrators and his office was vandalized, and there was all this internal pressure within the school to get him to resign for that. I mean, someone who's been personally affected by this kind of leftist agitation, even they're coming out and saying, well, we do have a problem on campuses right now with this kind of culture that's been created that's maybe not necessarily being addressed the best way it can be by the college or universities. At the same time, very skeptical to the idea of the federal government coming in and seeking to either create a committee or send in national troops. You know,
no, I agree, Davis. They're right, and I don't think it's the right way to go about it. I'd love to see a solution there. Thank you so much for your piece and for coming on the show today, Davis Richardson. We'll be back with more right after this.
We live in a day when America's families are under attack like never before.
Buddy Smith, Senior Vice President of the American Family Association.
The war against biblical principles rages on numerous fronts. The internet, Hollywood, Washington, D.C., America's corporate boardrooms, and the list goes on. At American Family Association, we're committed to standing against the enemies of God, the enemies of your family. And we recognize it's an impossible task without God's favor and your partnership. Thank you for being faithful to pray for this ministry, to give financially, and to respond to our calls for activism. What you do on the home front is crucial to what we do on the battlefront. We praise God for your faithfulness, and may He give us many victories in the battles ahead as we work together to restore our nation's biblical foundations.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be His ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
Holy Spirit speaks to everybody. The problem is most folks don't listen.
Lonnie Poindexter.
If they do listen, they don't take it to heart or they get fearful or whatever. But when you listen and act upon it, wonderful things happen. And because a man of God heard the voice of God and acted upon it, it blesses me today. And you as well for listening in.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Hi, I'm Hank Weinblum with your word of the week. The ultimate insult is not a 4-letter word, it's a 3-letter word.
I have been smeared as a rat by the President of the United States.
It's an epithet Michael Cohen has become familiar with.
I know it's got to be painful being called a rat.
Sympathy from committee chairman Elijah Cummings.
That's one of the worst things you can call them, because when they go to prison, that means a snitch.
It's a bit of nastiness made famous by James Cagney.
Come out and take it, you dirty yellow-bellied rat, or I'll give it to you through the door.
Although he never said, "You dirty rat," his impersonators sure did.
You dirty rat? I'm gonna get you, you dirty rat.
Rats are not among the most beloved of animals, blamed for the spread of plague and other disease. The little rodents are not welcome in most neighborhoods. Research scientists, though, are fond of lab rats, good for experiments. In suburbia, you can be a mall rat. If you don't throw things out, you're a pack rat. Or the rat pack if you're Frank, Dean, or Sammy. Getting out of this rat race with your word of the week, Hank Weinblum, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Yes, well, that's one of the fallacies that I show up in my book. That if you look at the average credit score of people of different ethnic backgrounds, you'll discover that the order in which they rank by credit score is also the order in which they rank by acceptance for the highest quality mortgages. Now, that is, whites, for example, are turned down far more than Asian Americans.
So that's Thomas Sowell. You know, he has a new book out. It's actually, I found out it's a release of his of a previous work. It's a updated edition of Race and Disparities, I think is the title. I have it. I'm about 40% of the way through it. So I was trying to get the book club chicks to have it as one of our book club books. But word got out because me and one of the other book club moms were good friends. We were reading it. We actually bumped into each other in the airport in Dallas. ended up sitting right behind each other because we were flying on Southwest. You can pick your own seat. She was flying with her husband and her daughter, and I was coming back from a work trip, so I was by myself. And I pull the book out, the Thomas Sowell book. It has a black cover. I pull it out, and I, sit on my lap and then start sticking my stuff under the seat in front of me. And I just noticed between the seat, because she was sitting right in front of me, that she had the same book, like, kind of balancing it on her armrest while she pushed her stuff under the seat. And I was like, I don't want to say her name on the radio, but I was like, hey, are you reading this? And she was like, I am. I was like, I was hoping we'd do this for book club next month. And she was like, it's a tough read. How far are you? And so we compared what pages we were on. And I was like, I've been working my way through it. Because first of all, Thomas Sowell's one of the smartest people on this planet. He's probably the smartest man in America. And that's saying something, because I've met some pretty smart people. I've met Art Laffer. I'm not even going to go down the list of smart people I've met. I've met some amazingly intelligent people. And I've never met Thomas Sowell, but he is brilliant. And that's not my opinion. That is like the widely accepted opinion of, he's 88 years old and he's still out there. This was an interview he did on Fox News. He was on Barney and Company, Fox Business. And so, when I hear him talk about the book, of course, I have a little stack of books on my nightstand, and I'm going to go back and get it out and keep slogging through it. It's not the easiest read. Like, some of his books that have been tough reads have been easier for me to work my way through than this one. But I really need to be committed on getting that done, like give myself a due date and finish it, because it's one of his books that I think is really important for us to read, because you heard him give those statistics about how many Americans are of certain races are older in their median age, meaning half are younger, half are lower. Meaning you don't see very many Asians in the football world or in the basketball world. You see some, but not nearly representative of their percentage of the population. He also says that, in that clip, that you don't have the same kind of academic results out of the same household. So you have the same two people married to each other, have 3 biological children, or 5 or 2, and the children have really widely varied academic results. This is something that we all know this. Like, no one would argue with that, right? But we still have millions of Americans who feel that because this group of people statistically doesn't measure up to that group of people, that there must be something inherently unequal in our society, when it's really personal choice. You see it all the time. You might have 2 or 3 kids. Let's say you have 2 kids from the same family, and they're raised in a household where there wasn't a material change in socioeconomic status or, neighborhood or anything like that. Same school. So the 2 children are siblings. They're close in age, and they went to the same educational institutions and had the same exposure to everything: museums, art, whatever, travel. They were taken out of the country, taken, to the beach, taken all the traditional places that you're like, I need to take my kids, get them well-rounded. One kid excels and is a straight A student and then takes college courses and has, over a 4-point GPA. And the other one chooses to kind of be a little more laid back in their approach and has, a good GPA, but not nearly the same. Those 2 kids are not going to have the same college options. The college is not going to offer the second kid the same thing that they offered the first kid. Not because they hate the second kid or anything. They're just going by the GPA and the test scores, right? So can you say that there must have been something inherently unequal in the treatment of those 2 children in the household? Or would you say that the 2 kids made different choices? One chose to obsess over their grades and study extra hard and spend more time making sure that the grade would be an A, and only earned 1 B their entire college career, or maybe 2 or whatever. Just they didn't earn many because they had it over 4.0. And the other kid made a few more B's, maybe even had a C occasionally, and was more laid back in their approach. They studied smart, but didn't apply the same level of rigor. Is it the parents in this equation that are somehow wrong? Was the child done wrong in some way? Was there some kind of inherent bias towards the older child? Or is it that individuals, as we are created to do, God has given us an absolute decision-making authority? If we want to destroy our lives, God does not stop you from doing that. Now, you can pray that the Lord would guide you and keep you from straying. And, you can pray that the Lord would be present in your decisions, and he'll answer. But if you're just running around willy-nilly and you're making horrible decisions and that's your thing, and you wake up one day and you're like, my life's a mess, or I don't have the result that I wanted. I wonder whose fault this is. It's yours. It's your fault. And that's the hardest thing for any of us to accept. And I think that's what we're seeing on the left. It's not just this romantic inclination they have towards utopianism. They don't just enjoy it. They fantasize over it. They salivate over it. They wish for it. They dream for it. They meet about it. They talk about it over coffee. They just want everyone in America to have the exact same thing, knowing good and well that there are millions of people in America like me who, if you said everybody line up and everybody gets the same 5,000 square foot house, 2 late model luxury cars, everybody gets the same, number of cowgirl boots and, whatever. So basically a luxury lifestyle, everybody gets the exact same private plane and a helicopter, line up, everybody gets it. There would be millions of Americans who would stand back and be like, no, I don't want to get in line and have you give me all that stuff. There'd be another millions of Americans who would get in line, get the free stuff, and then fix it, adjust it, sell it. They'd get rid of it because they don't want the same thing that everybody else has. And most people, if they're being honest, don't want the exact same thing that you have. What they really want is they want something better. We're just going to be real here. If we're just going to tell the truth and just not play around with each other. They want something better. They want their own thing. They want their own specific thing that's their own, not yours, and they want it to be better than yours. Now, there's a lot of people who they don't care what you have. They just want what they've been planning on. They want that thing that they've been dreaming about. It doesn't look anything like yours. It doesn't look anything like theirs. It just looks like what they've made up in their mind, and that's what they're working for. So every single person is different. Even identical twins are not identical in their mind. So they may look identical on the outside, but on the inside, they are completely different people, unique and not able to be replicated. So as often as we'll see a star who looks back, this one star is a complete and utter lookalike, like a carbon copy of another person. Or you'll see someone who, like they have these Meghan Markle lookalikes, and they go around and their job is to take pictures at events, and people will pay like $10 to take a picture with this Meghan Markle and Prince Harry lookalike. And when you look at them, they do look a lot like the people that they mimic. And this is all over the place. They have lookalikes for almost every star, and they have lookalikes for, like, I've had people tell me that they've seen someone and they just knew it was me. And they walked up to that person and they said hello. And I'm like, you saw a 6 foot tall black woman, 6 foot 2 inches tall, with sister locks that look like me. And you walked up to her and said hello. And then you were shocked that it wasn't her. Are your eyes working? I'm sure you didn't see anybody who's my height with, looks like me and the same hair. Like, that is hard to believe. But I've had people tell me that. And so I'm not saying that we can't find anybody who looks alike, but you'll never find the same 2 people, the same 2 actual living, breathing people who have the same exact ideas and have never, ever diverged in thought or opinion or wants or desires or anything. You're just not going to find that. God doesn't make copies. He just makes unique, specific creation. So if that's true, and we know it's true, okay, miss me with this discussion about how that's not true. That is true. There are no 2 same people that have ever been identical. There never have been, never will be. Even the twins aren't the same. So that's true, which means that you're never going to have identical results. So while you'll have 2 people who are economists who went to Harvard who achieve similar results, you'll never go to those 2 people and say, do you want this? Do you want that? And take them down a list of 100 questions of things that they want, and they're identical just because they're both economists and maybe they're both men and they both graduated from Harvard. So we're never going to have equal outcomes. The results will never be equal. We will have lots of people succeed. And what I've noticed as the older I get is I notice that people who are successful group themselves together in communities in which they can replicate that success for their children. And so they tend to group around things that they have in common, like socioeconomics, religion, so they're intentionally moving into neighborhoods where the people in the neighborhood have similar socioeconomic backgrounds, similar educational backgrounds, and similar family structures. Because you don't have to explain to your kid why that kid has a dad and 4 moms. You don't have to deal with that if you're living in a neighborhood that is similar in makeup to your own. So people seek those environments out. And then they seek out educational options for their kids that reinforce the values they're trying to put into the kids at home. And if they realize that the area that they're in doesn't suit what they believe, doesn't have the same thing going on for the kids that they're looking for, they move the kid out of that educational environment into a private institution, or they move to a different neighborhood. Again, seeking a certain outcome, which completely obliterates the utopian ideals put forward by the Democrats. Not only do people not want the same things, they won't accept the same things. For every person you find who would accept a universal income, you'll find 100 who would spit on that and never come pick it up. They don't want it. They don't want to be given anything. And that's why the Democrats are selling a whole spate of options that are Loserville. Bullet train to Loserville. Let's go to the phones. Ron in Tennessee. Hey, thank you for coming on the show today.
Hello, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, wonderful. Now, I just want to commend you for your job that you do each day on the radio, giving us the information that we receive each day.
Thank you for listening.
We truly appreciate the information you give and make us be able to think better and make good decisions when it comes to certain things, even when it comes to politics.
Awesome.
I commend you for your job.
Well, thank you, Ron. Thank you for calling and for sharing that. It's nice to hear a word of encouragement on a Friday. I have to say it's my pleasure to be here and do that. It's my pleasure to get a chance to just interact with everybody here. I want to close the show out. We're getting into the last couple of minutes. The American Defense League CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, had a comment about Omar that I felt like was super important. I wanted you to hear it. He says, Ilhan Omar's dual loyalty accusation is anti-Semitic and un-American. This guy can hardly be considered a conservative. He has written an op-ed about this, and he also has made this comment publicly. And I want to go out on the weekend just saying this, that first of all, the Bible is very clear. If you bless Israel, you will be blessed. If you curse her, you will be cursed. So anyone who practices anti-Semitism is playing with their own eternity. That being said, if you're for infanticide and you think that, siding with the drug lords over our immigration and customs officials is a good thing, then you're probably not going to have a problem with anti-Semitism. You see how that works? So here he is. His name's Jonathan Greenblatt. He's Jewish, and he has this message for Omar. It's number 5.
Well, look, it's hard for me to say what's in Representative Omar's heart, but I have to deal with the reality of what she said again and again and again. And the fact of the matter is this accusation that Jews have a dual loyalty or require people to pledge allegiance to a foreign power. It is an anti-Semitic charge that has been used against the Jewish people literally for hundreds of years, long before there was a state of Israel. So we are offended by this anti-Semitism that is not only directed at the Jewish people, it is an un-American thing to say, because accusations of loyalty to a foreign power, that was used against Japanese Americans in World War II. It was used against Catholics when John F. Kennedy was running for president in 1960. It doesn't deserve a place in the public conversation, period.
It doesn't. And I would have the same kind of furor if it was someone talking about blacks. I would have the same furor. I get really ticked off when I hear people say all white people have white privilege, or all white people are somehow guilty of the sins of slavery, even the ones who are alive today who never had anything to do with it, or immigrants who've been here since that happened. I get upset about all of it. None of it has a place here in our discourse. We have to be clear about that. God bless you. Have a fantastic weekend. And thanks for making your home at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect